thinking about what 10-year-olds do, like play and have fun, we were forced to think about family separation. What if my dad gets picked up? We learned about the city's like hate and angst against the Muslim community, and like I grew up too fast, and so like my coming into office, I've always prioritized and campaigned on ending police surveillance and just like the broader surveillance apparatus. The NYPD will never admit to this, but there are reports. There's tons of reports that, of course, like share the NYPD's violence. But I remember during one of the first hearings I attended as a council member, the counterterrorism chief of the NYPD was before us, and I asked him to apologize, to publicly make a statement and apologize for conducting the Muslim surveillance project. And he, under oath said there was no Muslim surveillance project. And so, the fight, what your question is interesting because there are some issues that like, even if it like gets solved in like a piece or like for one incident, there's still a systemic understanding or status quo that like hasn't been broken. And so, from 10-year-olds to 35 years old, I'm still talking about surveillance. Like it is something that I think right now is actually getting even more egregious with biometric technology, facial recognition tools. So some of my legislation actually focuses on anti-surveillance initiatives.
Okay, so how would you plan on improving immigrants' rights inside of Parksville, like their working rights and just like?
Yeah. So, I'm a proud daughter of Bangladeshi immigrants. I represent Park Slope, and the guys who came before me in this position were from Park Slope. I grew up in Kensington, and Kensington is what we now call Little Bangladesh. And so I've seen the plight of my parents who raised 3 rebel daughters, and we're figuring life out in a place where the resources or the services they needed were not coming from government because they couldn't trust that government had their back. It was coming from community. So I deeply believe that the way in which we care for immigrants it required, you guys want to? No. That didn't happen. That immigrants require community, and so as people have been migrating to New York City, and especially when we experienced the influx in 2022, that there were leaders from those communities who were able to provide them with language access with services that were in their languages, to supporting them if they like took a job as a delivery worker or a food vendor. So the community piece has been very important for me. I also have several pieces of legislation. One that would, if ICE, in our city we have what's called sanctuary policies, and we're considered a sanctuary city. And what that means is that local law enforcement cannot be giving information to ICE to like fast track or expedite the detention and deportation process. But there's been many accounts of somebody in the corrections department or the probation department, the NYPD, slipping in information like, hey, I got somebody, you guys want to take them. And it's been happening because there's no recourse. So I feel that who've been unjustly experiencing this collusion to be able to sue and get their trauma heard, and fight back against a machine that was unjustly trying to deport them. So, in the state's budget now, apparently some of what I proposed has been worked on. And so I'm excited to read about that because at the state level, our state is not a sanctuary state. So if you leave New York City and go into Buffalo, Buffalo is not a sanctuary state. So you're not protected if, like in those cities, the collaboration between ICE and local law enforcement is even more dire, which is why, I feel like New York City has to remain the safest place for all of us. And we shouldn't be the ones saying like, well, they should go somewhere else. Actually, they shouldn't go somewhere else. And in a time when we're also experiencing Trump, tearing apart our civil protections against trans people getting health care, women's reproductive health, and reproductive justice more broadly, families are leaving New York City because they can't afford to live here, but they're leaving to red states because it's cheaper there, but the protections aren't there, the ones that New Yorkers have fought for. And so, it is incumbent on us to make sure that our city is not only safe and that we look out for one another, but that we keep building on that safety.
Okay, and what would that look like? So, like, how would you provide that safety and that sanctuary for these immigrants who are being targeted by ICE and local law enforcement?
So, one is through legislation and being a strong advocate against our previous mayor's in harmful rhetoric against immigrants. Mayor Adams did not speak about immigrants in an inclusive, welcoming way. He often pit immigrants against existing New Yorkers, and oftentimes he would actually pit Black New Yorkers and immigrants against one another. And what that creates is infighting between those two groups, as opposed to us being like, what is the mayor doing? Why, we don't have our fair share because the mayor has disinvested in all of these various services. And so I think the advocacy piece, having leaders who are supportive of immigrants and are speaking out against that kind of divisive rhetoric is important. The second is Know Your Rights workshops. My team and I, immediately after Trump was inaugurated, we created the Brooklyn Immigrant Support Network, and it's a coalition of the local community organizations, neighborhood or block associations, individual grassroots leaders, and other emerging initiatives to come together and basically assess what is everybody's skill set, where is everybody's strength. So we started doing these Know Your Rights trainings across all of the commercial verticals, going into businesses and informing employers that you don't have to let ICE in for any reason, unless of course there is a judicial warrant that is signed. But oftentimes these guys are coming without a warrant, without any judicial authority. And we created a sign that says employees only as a marker that no one can go into that space. And so many of the businesses around Fifth Avenue have those signs in their stores.
Okay.
I feel very strongly what you're doing. I very much appreciate what you're doing for immigrants, and I'm sure a lot of immigrants that need help will come to you. I would like to get back to our school safety. How would you improve or change the set of, then would it be possible for our school to get more funding?
Would it be possible? Yeah, it would be possible. What are you guys fighting for? What do you guys need?
Funding for our auditorium, because we cannot have a graduation for our senior class, because there's no AC inside of it.
The AC thing is horrible.
Crazy. And the lights were like, they're like pretty messed up. So we had like we had a play, and it was like, we had to push it back because the lights were all messed up. And also the bathrooms are like crazy. Like we were speaking on, like they, especially the boys' bathroom. It's like
I feel, yeah, I
really bad.
It's not okay. It's not okay. Well, look, I do support the schools that I represent in the district. I represent a little over 40 of them. And I'm not like the bank that I can, but we have been looking at the schools that, right, like without an auditorium, you can't do performances. It's not just graduation. It's a space that is necessary for your play practices or whatever else. So the multi-purpose use spaces especially have been priority. So I'd love to connect again or right after this. I'm actually not sure what my allocations are looking like for the John Jay Complex, but I have supported some of the other schools in this building.
Commissioner Hall, really?
So, my name is Shahana Hanif.
My name is Katie.
We are with Journalism Club in PSC, the PSC Scholar. And today we'll be interviewing Councilwoman Hanif. Okay, so how would you define effective school safety?
Well, one, thank you so much for having me. I think it's great that you want to hear from your local representative. School safety to me is one where students feel safe, and that to me is free of metal detectors. I truly believe that having the resources that are absolutely necessary, like a librarian, school social worker,